Hello, and welcome to the Agile Magician's Bookshelf live readings. Yes, I am an Agile Magician. So we're going to be looking at live readings today, and I just wanted to mention something for members only, which I'll talk about in a moment, just to welcome esteemed members of the Wayfarers channel, I guess. Within the Actual Magician's Bookshelf channel. So that's Tracy and Birds and Bill. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And it might be a quite small, intimate gathering today, so we'll see how we do. I thought one thing I'd do, as well as just mentioning what's currently uploading, what I finished recording and editing and preparing for the members only video. That should be up in about an hour or two from the time of this live recording, and that's got an actual practical method that you can all try out, and I'm looking forward to discussing that with you in the members only community area. But I thought one thing we could do is just to continue a little bit with our Lenormand reading and just take a look at the cards in combination. I realised that whilst I had gone through the Lenormand cards one at a time, if you're new to the channel and want to watch that, that's the last live video I did that I'll put a new thumbnail on, because I actually went through every card and looked at its symbol meanings and its original meanings and how we can use that in the reading. But what I'd like to do is actually do a couple of Lenormand readings if we've got some questions for the Lenormand, but first look at how we combine the meanings of the cards, because it, again, as we saw last week, is a lot easier than people make out, and I want to explain why some of the confusions have crept into Lenormand reading. So we'll take a look at that, but we can switch to tarot or an oracle deck, depending on how we do and what questions we have. So I welcome questions from anyone on the stream, anyone in chat, whether you're a member of the channel or just a regular subscriber. So it'll be there to rewatch, Birds, so go and take a look at that, and hopefully today will be of interest in terms of how we put the cards together, because I'll go through the meaning of each card as it appears as well. So just a quick heads up for those in the membership area, which is $4.99 a month at minimum, and we have what I've done is I've covered Chaos International number 5, and I've gone through some of the people, some of the articles, some of the state of the art of chaos magic back in, this one was 1988, but most particularly I've looked at magical formula, and there is an article in here, and it reminded me of a use that I have to create magical formula using tarot cards, and why that can be very useful, very insightful. And also it takes a traditional form of Western esotericism with set magical formula and set magical names like Yod Hey Vow Hey, Inri, IAO, and all of these abrahadabra and things like that. But actually, chaos magic took a very contemporary spin on that, and then over the years I've developed that into a technique with tarot, so I've shared that because it's dead easy to use, really straightforward, and it's something that everyone can try, and it basically gives you the sorts of results that are respective of your current level of experience with the tarot, with occultism, with magic, and it's a method that anyone can apply no matter what your background is and so on. So that will be uploaded very shortly. It'll notify all subscribers, but it is a members only video, so do join us if you want to take a look at that. in effect, if you're getting a monthly membership and that's $4.99, you're getting a complete class on developing your own magical formula using chaos magic and tarot, a unique method, a very powerful method that I've used for many years for the cost of $4.99 as opposed to, say, doing a whole course at $200 or $300. So that's going to be available for you very shortly. Now, let's take a look at Lenormand. Can you do a couple reading or just a reading for a single person? What I tend to do with that, there are a couple of methods in Tarot Twist that, in Tarot Twist, because I actually use them for couples, relationship readings and stuff like that. But usually, as quite often, it's one person that I'm doing the reading for, what tends to happen is the spreads that I've developed over time and tend to use are for the use of that one person. So it's not really a reading for a couple, it's a reading for a relationship between two people as seen by one person. And that's the person I'm doing the reading for. Does that make sense? I'll see if I can find the actual method in here. Otherwise, I'll just explore it perhaps when we've done a few Lenormand. Well, actually, I think it is in the Andrea Green book, Tarot and Love. I can't remember what we called it in the end, or Tarot for Relationships. But it's certainly in there because there's a lot of methods for different stages of a relationship. Let me just take a look here. All of these, each of these is not just a spread, but it's actually a totally different way of using tarot. There's 78 different ways of it. Synchronicities, Victoria's Secret, spread, finding amber method. Yeah, I think it's actually in the Andrea Green book on relationship readings, because that's where we put all of our love and relationship readings. So it's in the Andrea Green book, and I'll have to have a quick look at what that's called. Let me just take a quick look on my phone here. Andrea Green Tarot. Andrea Green books. So it's on Amazon. 7-Day Lenormand. Okay, for some reason. Yes, it's called Tarot and True Romance. Romance Your Life with Tarot. And that is on Kindle. And it's Tarot for True Romance by Andrea Green, which is our pen name. It's Dolly Goodwin, my pen name for sort of general accessible material that isn't as specific or niche as a lot of the other tarot material. Mind Magic, Murray Hope. Yeah, I am going to do a video on Murray Hope because their work was very copy and pasted. It was very generic. But they did do a very good book on tarot and psychology, which was, had quite a lot of useful information in it and things like that. But the rest of their work wasn't very grounded in the tradition that it came from. It was just like, let's take this sort of very bland ritual form and copy it for Atlantis or the Grail legends or ancient Egypt or Celtic shamanism or whatever it might be. So I think her writing sort of fell out of favour quite a while ago. But there aren't some interesting things in there, definitely. She obviously had some experience of certain things and gave a bit of consideration to psychology and occultism. So I don't know what specifically she said about mind magic, what specifically that might be. Right, while Bill perhaps fills us in on that a little bit, I'm just going to take a look at some of these cards. And first of all, the importance, as we looked at last week with Lenormand reading, and to some extent tarot, but certainly with Lenormand, is that because these are basically emblems rather than complex metaphors like the tarot cards, each of these is an emblem. This could literally say mountain on it, and this could say cross on it, and it would be just as good as a Lenormand reading, as an artifact, as a tool for divination, as a picture of a cross or a picture of a mountain. You can actually, I do have a deck somewhere that I handmade back in the day with just the words on, so I could lay them out and just do a very quick reading straight from the symbols themselves with no illustrative filter or gloss on top of it. But it's very useful for a client to see that there's a mountain, to see that there's a cross, because then they can recognize the symbols and follow them very easily. And it looks as if we're doing some work by actually then interpreting them, of course. Whereas if it literally said suffering and obstacle, they'd wonder why they were paying you or having a free reading with you even, if it was that easy to actually read, which it is. So the mountain, as we saw last time, is an obstacle, and the cross is about suffering. It's not about complex metaphors or stories or narratives about Christ and the cross and sacrifice or mysticism, like through the cross to the rose and through the rose to the cross, all of this sort of level. It is just about suffering, about being nailed to a cross. That's a bad thing. And in the game, it's not the card that you want to land on. So if we had, and this is a question for those in the live session, cross and mountain, first of all, is that a good or a bad thing? Is that something that is challenging to bring out the best in a person's character with a lot of opportunities in the struggle? Or is it a really good reading for a person, asking about a relationship or about finance or relocation, whatever it might be? Or is it a really bad thing? And that's a question to those in the live chat. Spring some interactivity upon us. Because with tarot, we tend not to see any of the cards as particularly good or bad. Some seem better than others, but they're all fairly nuanced. This may be a sham fight, a play fight, a discussion, dynamic discussion. And this might be a bout of sadness or suffering, but one that the person can get out of bed and get on with the next stage of their journey and so forth. So, yeah, so with this, as Bill is saying, it would depend on how much work someone would want to put into the situation, but no matter their attitude, what the cards are saying is that it's suffering and an obstacle. So, yes, they could work around the mountain, but that might be the cause of the suffering. The obstacle might be causing the suffering. The suffering itself might be the obstacle itself. So when we put Lenormand cards together, there's a load of tosh in the sort of cartomantic arena about reading left to right or reading right to left. So Tracy, what I'm looking at here is basically two cards. We have the mountain, the cross. Here is the obstacle. Here's the suffering. Now, we could read that left to right or right to left, or as a pair simultaneously. And hello, Carol. Hello and welcome to the live chat. You're very welcome. Any questions you have, just put them into the chat. So I have listened and sat and watched both impromptu readings by people who use the Lenormand, people who've learned after our reintroduction of it, and people who were doing a little bit of it before, around the world. And I've heard them give presentations, and I've heard them explain or try to explain left to right or right to left. And I have seen them confusing not only the audience or their readers, but themselves as well, by literally saying, oh, I read right to left, that's the only way to read it. You've got to look at this as a noun and this as a verb. And then they've given the demonstration and they've read it literally the other way round by their own definition. But then they've then re-explained it and confused everyone even more. So the best way of looking at Lenormand in terms of two cards and joining them, combining them, reading and interpreting them in a pattern, in a spread, in a layout, in a combination, is with other cards, with the houses that they're in and the context and the question. If someone has said to you, I am doing this thing and I'm struggling with it, what do the cards say? Then it is likely that the obstacle is the thing that they're doing and their struggle is the suffering. And yep, sometimes cards can seem like they're highlighted or shadowed by other cards. When we think about how this derives from coffee ground reading, that would literally be the case, where the mountain might be darker on this side but more open on this side, so there might be a more positive thing to the cards this side than this side, as we might read it in coffee grounds. But when you have the question, it's a lot easier to read them in context. Now, when people talk about left to right and right to left, they mean, and unfortunately they always mean it differently to each other and sometimes themselves, but it's the equivalent of saying, let's have a look. Say, for example, if we looked at this, then it could be that the man is facing an obstacle. The man is facing an obstacle. Or it could be that the obstacle is the man. Does that make sense? That there's a man who has an obstacle, or there's an obstacle that is a man. So we're reading it one way or the other, where one card applies to the other. Now, generally speaking, if we take another card, so let's just take the card we're given. No cheating. So here we have the garden. And the garden is all about networking and meeting and conversing with other people, being seen out and about. So we've got networking, obstacle, man. Now, generally speaking, the way to apply them is that the cards all collapse this way. So this is at the front, and these are all collapsing down to that. So instead of reading left to right or right to left, think of it as a collapsing down to the card that we're reading in this direction. So the networking is applying to the obstacle. So there is an obstacle that is about networking. And this is where when people talk about left to right and right to left, they just confuse everyone because they read it that way, then explain it that way. So one is right to left and then they explain it left to right because it's the way we explain things. So I tend to see it as collapsing in on. So there is a man, okay, that is the object to which all of these things apply. The man is facing an obstacle. So the obstacle is applying to the man, and the networking is creating the obstacle, and the obstacle is facing the man. Does that make sense? It is not a man who is an obstacle to people networking. It is being out and about. It's creating an obstacle for the man. So this is the object, and these are the things that apply to the object. But this is the object to which this thing applies. And then if we have something here, of course, that's going to then explain the networking that is causing the obstacle for the man. Does that make sense? I'm not going to go on until a few people have told me that that makes sense or have any questions, because I want us to be absolutely clear that that's as simple as it gets. It really is that simple. So this applies to this, applies to this. And I don't say that's reading right to left or left to right, because I might say it's reading right to left and then say, so the man is facing an obstacle in the networking, which is reading it left to right. But yeah, right is applying, it's collapsing down this way to the card that I'm reading. So let's take another card then. We'll put that one there. And now we have the coffin card. Okay, so, oh, that's great, Lee, Carol, Bill, Tracy, thank you. Yep. So now we have the coffin, which is a legacy applying to the networking. So there is something already existing, some current state of legacy that is overhanging the garden. So there is and think of it this way, there's a coffin in the garden. Something has already happened. It's likely that this man is facing an obstacle with the networking that has a legacy, that the legacy in the networking that is causing an obstacle for the man is something that he's wanting to join a group, for example. But the group has got a big, long past history, and their current manager is part of the networking that the man will eventually have to do, but that networking is causing an obstacle for the man. It reminds me of a situation where I went to apply for a job, and I was sat in a reception area waiting for the interview, and a couple of guys were sat next to me. One went in, and then I assumed that they were also there for the interview and so forth. And then I got talking to the guy next to me, and he was saying, this is my job. I'm reapplying for it. And I thought, oh no, oh dear, this is awkward. And I've been on the other side of that situation myself. But and he was a bit weird with me and stuff, and he was really slating the company a little bit and dissing them, talking them down a bit. And I went into the interview, and then they said something like, well, unfortunately, and this is in confidence, we are obliged to give the previous post holder another post within his contract within the company at this time. But if you were to take the director job, then you would have him as a member of your management team. How would you feel about that? And it was obviously not how would I feel about it. I was wondering what the hell this guy would feel about it coming down this way. And I fluffed an answer, and I was very glad that I didn't get the job. I can't remember. I don't think they even offered it me in the end, but certainly if they had have done, I would have turned it down. I think I actually got another job in the meantime, something along those lines, but it meant that I didn't have to face some legacy in the establishment of the people, the group, the company, everything to do with the networking that would be an obstacle to me. And as I walked into the interview, I was presented with the obstacle. I knew it was about existing people, and it was a legacy that would be the basically the end of my interest in that, and this person would probably want an end to me being in that role as well, or to anyone else being in that role, to be honest, when I'd had the conversation with them. So does that make sense as how we're reading it? That if we read it from there and then to there, to there, to there, and then from there to there, to there, to there, it's a lot easier. Don't start all the way here and apply that to that and then try and apply that to that and apply that to that. Do it incrementally, going in a loop this way and making sense of it, so you're reading both left to right and right to left. And it doesn't matter how someone explains it, whether they say left to right but they're reading right to left or whatever. You're just applying this one to this one, then going to apply that one to that one and reading it that way, and then applying that one to that one to that one to that one and reading the whole thing. So you basically make up the sentence structure. Yeah? Shall we try that again together with some different cards? I'll take these cards up. Then we can perhaps do a reading for someone and just read as many cards as we need to read. Okay, so let's start off with, so we have the child, which we, the cards go around in circles, as does everyone's story. So I'm just going to lay out some fairly random cards. They all appear to be not quite in numerical sequence. I did shuffle these. Okay, let's go for that. Okay, so we need a question. So let's say, for example, I'm trying to think of a recent question that someone's actually asked. Okay, how about a person is wondering whether to enter into therapy again for a long-standing issue that they've had, okay? And they've asked the Lenormand and asked us as a reader what the cards have to say about that. They're likely to do it. They're pretty sure about that, but they're uncertain to some extent. They could be persuaded out of it. So it's not a should I or shouldn't I. It's a I'm intending to, but I just need some clarification. What do the cards say? So where do we start? First of all, we have the child, the fox, the bird, and the clouds. Do we start over here or do we start here? So do we start with the child or the clouds? It's my question in the live sesh. And how's everyone doing, by the way? I mean, has everyone had a reasonable week? Some people working over the weekend, or do we all tend to have our weekends off? As an author, I tend not to have any particular time off, just when I can grab it. So I don't always know when the weekend is. These sessions are actually very useful. I know my bin is collected on a Tuesday and I have these sessions on a Friday. So I sort of work out where I am in the week based around those two activities. So how's everyone else doing? So child, fox, bird, clouds. Yeah. Okay, so we start with this. We're going to start here, and then we're going to apply this to this, and then that to that to that, and that to that to that to that, and loop it round just as we did. So the child, and here's where I disagree with everyone who goes on about Lenormand can't do deep readings or is just for everyday matters and so on. I've seen and done loads of readings that have had a very deep psychological or spiritual nature to them, because as we saw last week, these cards are based on dream symbols which come from our deepest unconscious, the oldest form of divination known to humanity, and that's on the table as we speak. So we might cheat by just looking at the right and saying, well, there's some confusion over there because the clouds is all about losing your way, but we'll come on to that. So we start with the child. So the child, so what can we say about that to their question? We can say, well, I think what you're going to do in therapy is work with your inner child. So a lot of the issues that you're going to be facing will be about your childhood. They won't be necessarily about your current relationships. They won't be about your teenage life or events that have happened within the last few years. It's going to keep coming back to your childhood. So be prepared for that. And is that something that you've considered? Is that something you're going to be guiding your therapeutic process with? How is your therapist in terms of, for example, if they're doing a CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, then they're probably just going to want to look at your current activity, your current behavior and thought processes, and they're not going to want to go back into your messy, sticky childhood and so on. So if that's the case, you might want to consider a therapist who is really going to concentrate more on your childhood work, maybe trauma work. And obviously, if you're doing this as a live reading, quite often at this very card, because you'll have touched on something, because the cards will have brought something to the surface, the client will usually be crying at this point because they'll be accessing that. They won't be expecting it from a card reading unless they're used to having decent divination experiences, and so they might be quite touched by the fact that it's their inner child that is now on the table from their question about going into a therapeutic encounter. So then we have the fox, okay, and we now need to read the fox applying to the child. So the fox is all about independence, looking after oneself and looking after your immediate family and so on. So we just know that this is about the person, and we would say to them, in addressing your childhood, you are going to be bringing into that your current search for self-sufficiency. Okay? Your current ability to be competent and confident and secure in your own ability, to support yourself, and perhaps for anyone else that you have responsibilities for. So this might say that you have no real dependence at the moment, and that in your independence, that is something that you're going to be looking to strengthen by looking at your inner child work. Make sense? So this would also indicate that the better aspects of the therapy for them will be to encourage what's called outcome-related work, or solution-orientated therapy or counselling, that it's about them being able to do things independently, express things independently, look after themselves. Perhaps they've realised that they now need to look after themselves. Perhaps a significant other has passed away or something. Could it also mean, as Bill is saying in the live, some kind of interfering person on the querent that needs to be talked about? Now, if it was the snake, yes. But the fox, I'm applying to the child. So it's the child who is the preeminent object, and so these are supporting our interpretation of the child rather than introducing a new person, unless it was the snake. And even then, unless we were looking at the houses, which we'll take a look at in a minute as well, it would be that that might be their own sense of risk and danger and so forth. Again, unless the person had asked us, there are some people who might interfere with this, what do the cards have to say about that? And again, I would tend to read the snake as that. Well, cunning and trickery, deviousness, it sort of is, but that cunning, deviousness, trickery, particularly when fooling the bear, as we saw last week in the Tales of Reynard the Fox film on which this is based, is all in service of the fox looking after themselves, of making a go at it alone, not being able to rely on anyone else and so forth. So all of that serves the independence of the card. So the main keyword to place on that card, again, I don't have a copy of 7-Day Lenormand to hand. Actually, I might see if I can find it in a second, but yeah, it might be in a pile of books that I brought back from my dad's that I'd signed for him over the years, and it's a fuller set that I've got. I can't see it at the moment, not easily to hand, but yeah, the key word for this is more independence, a means of survival and so forth, and all of those serve that. And again, applying Occam's razor, child, independence. So your independence will be brought about by looking at your childhood stuff, okay? And particularly because we've got that context, always bringing back to the question, what do the cards have to tell me about my decision to go into a therapeutic encounter? So it's about your independence, but you're going to have to get that through looking at your childhood stuff, okay? Now the birds. What do we know about the birds? The birds, the main key word for the birds is really chatter or distraction. Chitter-chatter, noise, more than anything, and that can serve as a distraction. Now, in this case, and I'm sort of cheating a little bit because I sort of was thinking as well about how the cloud is literally clouding all of this. The clouds is confusing all of this. It's adding a bit of uncertainty to the whole thing. And that's really applying to this. So this noise, this chatter, is literally the chatter in the person's head, more likely. But it may be that they are very influenced by the opinions of others. And so it could be that they are currently facing a situation where there are a lot of opinions swirling about, a lot of noise around you at the moment. Lots of people, perhaps even just lots of people inside your own head, lots of parts of you have all got a voice at the moment, and they're all chattering, they're all giving you suggestions and so forth. Try not to go off point again, getting the right therapist. Exactly. It might be that you're not necessarily, that your doubt about entering into the therapeutic process, and the reason you've asked the card, is more because there are a lot of different opinions or people you could go to. But you need to find one that is going to support independent activity, solution-orientated, not necessarily, possibly CBT, but CBT isn't necessarily going to be good for the childhood stuff. But it has got to be something that isn't just, I don't know, pure Freudian or Jungian therapeutic work without a lot of adding some homework, some practical things you can do to practice supporting yourself, which is more solution-orientated work. And that is currently clouding your judgment. So the clouds are applying to the birds. Imagine birds trying to fly in the clouds where they can't see where they're going, but they're still chattering. There's the fox underneath them, so the fox is trying to just make a way for themselves in life, while above them all of the birds are chattering around in the clouds, and the child is just trying to play, trying to be free, trying to catch that butterfly, which of course is a very elegant symbol of transformation. So we've got clouds impacting birds, clouds and birds impacting fox, clouds, bird and fox impacting the child. Does that make sense how we've read that? And to be honest, if you did do it by looking at this side first, before you even looked at the child, you might say, I can see that you've got some confusion because there's a load of different opinions about what's right for you to do, but you need to really make your own choice, be independent, and perhaps do something new. Find a form of therapy that is quite new or novel to you. If we sort of force a reading straight down that way. But it comes to the same thing, and this is why, as Bill said, they're in a loop, and why it's pointless when you read in books. It just confuses the issue when people say you read right from left or left to right, and then they actually do the reading as they explain it that way, even though they might be applying it this way, and so on. Excellent. Right, now what we're going to do in our next 20 minutes, I want this to be like actually about doing readings. Most importantly, this is Tarot Unplugged, so we want to do some live readings rather than it being a discursive lecture or something. So we'll take a question if we can, if anyone's got a question, and we'll have a look at that. But whilst at least one person thinks of a question, I'm going to add houses, okay? So, in order to do this, let's take a look at, I'm going to imagine, how many cards have we got there? So I just need cards 1 to 4. 2. 4. There we go. Excellent. So I want us to imagine then, and birds is literally talking it out. So a talking therapy rather than maybe hypnotherapy or something like that. Massage therapy, hot stones therapy, sound bath therapy. Far more talking out therapy. Actually, we might be able to tell what sort of therapy it is in a second. So I'm going to place these cards underneath just for now. So that's cards number 1, 2, 3, literally numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. And imagine that this is in the top left-hand corner of a grand tableau. Okay, and this is why I always say, no matter, even if you're only going to read 2 cards or 3 cards, always lay out all 36 cards in a grand tableau, even if you don't read all of them. Just get used to it constantly, because you'll always start to bring in something new each time you do it. So imagine that this is in the top left-hand corner of a grand tableau, okay, where we've got the cards running across in 4 rows. Sometimes you have a bottom row as well with 4 cards in it, but let's just take this in our top left-hand corner. So we would say this is in house 1, this is in house 2, house 3, house 4. How do we know what the houses are? Well, it's the name of the cards that apply to that number. So it's as if we'd laid out the cards in number order across the lines. So this is in house 1, this is in house 2, this is in house 3, this is in house 4. Okay? Now, I'm just going to put those above this so we can see them at a bit of an angle, so we don't get too confused that these are cards. these are our cards still, but these are the houses that they're in. Okay. I shall just move our thought slightly there. This is literally the fourth house of the house. Okay, house of the house. I'll just put those at little angles there. They're all separate to each other. So now we have better context for our reading. So the houses provide us context. So the child is in the house of the rider. The fox is in the house of the clover. The birds are in the house of the ship, and the clouds are in the house of the house. It's quite good if the house is in the house of the house, because quite often you know that it's all about a domestic issue and that they don't really want to move if the house is in the house of the house. And you can get some quite poetic and oracular meanings from all of this as well. So the child is in the house of the rider, which we know is about news and novelty. So the child is also about novelty to some extent and newness. The child is literally a new person. Charlotte was telling me a little while ago that she was talking to a client, and she asked the standing question to a client in her particular therapeutic role, how are you with new people? And he looked at her and said, what, babies? And it took her a while to understand that when she'd said new people, he had a particular way of looking at the world, and he just assumed he meant he thought she was asking a really odd question about how he dealt with babies, but she meant new people, not new people. So the child is a new person, and this is the rider of news. Something unknown to the person. The clover is about a little bit of luck. Let's keep it as simple as that for now. The ship is about risk and literally going abroad, going somewhere outside of where you know, but it being a risky venture. And the house is all about the home and stuff. So, having read these cards already, we can now put them in these houses and get a bit more context, I hope. So the child, when we talked about the child, we said that was all about childhood work, and that might be quite new to the client. It might be something that brings them a lot of unexpected information. So they have to be aware that the child is going to be in the house of the rider, that rider is going to bring they're going to discover a lot of new things about themselves, about their family, about their upbringing, all sorts of things as a result of this therapy, which might in part lead to some of their hesitation. Make sense? So now we know that what's underneath it, that child is that inner child is going to expose a lot of new information that the client is going to have to be ready for. Make sense? Now, the independence is in the house of luck. So we can very simply say about that this situation is actually going to bring about lots of new opportunities and lucky encounters, and actually be a very positive thing in their life. That the more they find their independence, the more luck that they will actually have. They'll find themselves being in the right place at the right time. So that's a really good thing. So as long as they're aware that there's going to be a load of new stuff coming in, that their independence will lead to a lot of really positive things. So this is a good reading here in that context, in those houses. Now the birds that we talked about being voices or distractions is in the house of the ship. So let's just think about birds being in the house of the ship. That's a sort of neutral situation, really. It could be that they need to actually go outside of their country in order to find the right therapist. So maybe a therapist online and not locally. That is probably that situation there. It could be, and sometimes this happens, that the symbol of the ship will actually be on the property that you go to visit the therapist that you're looking into, or might be their logo, or they'll have a picture of a ship in their waiting room. It will sometimes, and I found this often with Lenormand because of the way it works from our deep unconscious and our super consciousness, or whatever you want to talk about, a global consciousness, an interconnected consciousness. Quite often it will be something literally like that. And then the clouds is in the house of the house, which is all about the home. So that would suggest that there is some confusion or doubt about whether this should be conducted at home or locally. And given this card here, it might be that some other people have suggested, or that they will find that form of therapy overseas, like literally out of their area, therefore online. Make sense? And obviously, when we have a real client with us, we can actually discuss that with them, and it will give a load of context to all of that, because we're doing this in the blind for a non-real reading. So we have to make up the context in terms of the cards, rather than the easy way, which is actually doing a real reading for somebody when they provide us all of the context as well. Does that make sense? Is that a fairly straightforward way of reading it? And when you have all of the cards on the table in all of the houses, and you have the question, it makes it so much easier to do the whole thing. So does anyone have a specific question that we can quickly ask, and then we'll do a reading in the last sort of 10 minutes that we have together? And first question. And I think with this, what we're going to do is just do it one card and then just read them, applying until we run out of energy, time, or information. So first person to type a question in gets their question answered, hopefully, or demoed at the very least. Yeah, quite often I see timelines when I read. I tend to do that, particularly with tarot. I usually have a sort of 3-month radar in my temporal field around the reading, but I tend to do timing by the context of the question and the number of minor arcana, literally the numbers of the minor arcana. Right, should I help a particular company? Right, Tracy, should you help a particular company? Brilliant, simple question. We've got 7 minutes. Allow for some questions at the end. Right, oh, nope, they want to stay like that. So, there we go, the fox. So how do we read that from what we've said? And just whilst you do that, whilst you have to think about that, type any answers in just from one card alone. Just going to quickly bob across the room and see if I can find the 7-Day Lenormand book. Okay, I'm back. So so I can't find the 7-day Lenormand book. I must have given my last copy to somebody, as I'm so often want to do. Yeah, right. So, but that has all of the keywords from each of the primary sources, I guess, and our own reading of the cards as well over time. So it's a very useful handbook. I use it for my go-to book when I have it to hand, so, or I forget it in my head. So the Fox, it's suggesting, is it beneficial for you to interact with this company? Are the cards indicating time wasting? Perhaps, yeah. So we need other cards, don't we? So the answer is there could be difficulties, and the answer is, if we're just doing it as a one card, would be, is it in your best interests? Absolutely, as Bill is saying way ahead of me, what would you get out of it? Yeah, what's in it for you? That should be your main consideration. What is in it for you? It might be that you're not going to get rewarded in a traditional manner, let's say. And so therefore it has to be something that there is something that reflects well on you, that you can play well with that particular company. Make sense? So first of all, don't expect them to chase after you. They're the chicken in this, or even the tree. You're the fox. Okay, this is your reading. You are the fox, and so therefore, what's in it for you? Now, interesting. So we now have the ring, which is contract. Okay, so there has to be a clear contract once you have decided what's in it for you. It has to be a binding thing, an agreement, a clear contract in order to get what you want. Yeah? That is acceptable to the other company. So you have to define the terms, but they have to agree to them, understand them, and know them. So you are far more in the driving seat of this than perhaps you might give yourself recognition, credit for, or acceptance of. That, and partly because you need to do it for yourself, that's why this needs to be so preeminent and clear. So what's the nature of that contract then? Can you see how now we're talking with the cards? We're just reading them, looping them round to make sense of the story. We're back to the birds. I did shuffle these, you saw me. So the birds is about noise and chatter and distraction. So it could be that currently there is a lot of noise, chatter and distraction, which is partly why you need to cut through it with a clear contract, and the time, all of that has to be agreed and so forth. But all of that does come back always to the fox. That how much time have you got for the reward that you are going to get? That needs to be absolutely crystal clear, because otherwise there's just going to be a load of noise and distraction that you are going to get into without that ring being in place. What is the nature of that noise and distraction? Other little pesky varmint, the mice. So the organisation or people or company that you're thinking of working with is currently being nibbled away at, and it's a slow process of small death by small cuts, as they might say. So currently, and as a result, they are allowing the mice to get into the pantry and take away all of their time, resource and energy, because they are not doing something that you might be able to bring to them. Makes sense? So we've got the fox, the ring, the birds and the mice. So we've got these little chattery boxes here that the fox might want to bite out of each of these, but you have to have the ring in place, this contract, clearly. So let's just do one more card to see how we can extend this, and then you can do a reading for yourself, I hope, as well. We have the garden. So it is a good opportunity for networking and for working with other people that may actually lead to opportunities, results, rewards. Yeah, don't let the mice get in your head because you have a contract to look after yourself. Okay, so the networking is a benefit that instead of the clouds over here now applying to the child, we've got the garden applying to the fox. The fox might find itself in a wonderful garden if it can make that journey. Make sense? And that's really just looping around each one. And obviously, if this was in a grand tableau, we'd have all of the other cards. We could see what was under the fox, what was above the fox, what was behind the fox. We could have a look at the business itself and look at what was really the situation there. So if you were going to talk to them, then you would be able to say, is it the case that you've just recently changed this situation because that card was above the company, above the tower, or so on? If we had the houses, you know how to apply for the contract, whether that was something you should do yourself or have someone else do it, or whether it was a verbal contract or whatever, would depend on the ring. And you could read all of the cards around the ring and the houses in which all of those cards are to answer the question, what sort of contract do I need? What sort of distractions do I have to be aware of? You can look at 9 cards around, including that and the houses, all of which in one singular grand tableau. You can look at any aspect of it. Where should I go to get the best networking and opportunities when I've sorted out the contract with this company? That will be what house is the garden in and what are the cards around it. Where you as the lady card in relation to all of that. What house are you in? What house is the other company in, or the organisation or the people that you're going to approach? And so on. Isn't that incredible? You can now, hopefully, what I've tried to do in these last 2 things, is really show how, with Lenormand, the more the merrier. The more cards, the easier and the better. As Bill, again, very succinctly, is pointing out, the rewards outside of the situation that come out of the situation from the people you meet, the things you learn, and also what did one of my bosses once say to me a long time ago, it's not so much about who you know or what you know, it's what you know about who you know, which is also fairly topical, I guess, with our current news cycle. But yeah, so the rewards outside, instead of the clouds over here, we have the garden. So in the long run, applying all the way down here, we have this, you're better with what you pick up from other people, as long as you're clear with the time that you're going to expend for what's in it for you and so forth. The cards you have that are limited edition, no, I've not gone back to that because I've been a bit too busy videoing our current new members only video, but I will go and do that, and I'll put the link in this one as well. It was the 6th edition for the Lenormand, I think, that we were talking about. This deck, we still have copies of it. I know that Shay's got some copies of it in the US. So, I think, and just oddly, that base card, not that I read the base card in Lenormand, is the home. So maybe introducing home working into the contract. So, okay, I think we're done for the day. Thank you very much for joining me in this. And again, I hope that if you'd like to join us in the members area, there's a new video going up, which is all about the more esoteric, how to make your own magical formula. And for anyone in the live who's also a Wayfarer member, you could have a look at the exercise on making a magical formula and perhaps use the technique I've suggested, without giving it all away, with the Lenormand instead of the tarot. Contact me directly for any of the sales of the deck, and I'll either organise it from the UK or get Shay in the US to organise it for you. So I'll probably, I can send you the link to the page, and as soon as that comes in, I'll work out where you are, and then we'll deal with that accordingly. Thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Bill, have a think about that mind magic thing, and perhaps drop me a comment or something like that. And I'd like to have a think about that. That would be useful. Okay then, so, and you're reading the Inner Meditation Guide, Bill. Excellent. Yeah, one of my favourite methods of all time. That's a personal favourite, so I'm a bit of an advocate for it. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to hearing about your magical formula if you're in the member section, and I hope to see you next week if you are joining us again in the live little active community that we're forming here. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great weekend. Take care.